Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we're going to go through my quarterback rankings. For the quarterback position, I will be going through every quarterback that I currently have ranked, which is basically every quarterback for all the positions. Once these videos are out, you can find the rankings up on the website, www.theffforge.com, where they will get updated whenever I update at least a few of the players in my current rankings. But for the other positions, I will not be going through the entirety of the rankings because there are, at least wide receiver, running back, even tight end, even though I just ranked too many of them. There are way too many players to go through in this video to have it be of any kind of, not way too long. So I'm going to try to keep these brief enough, go through a little bit on each of the players. If you have any questions, if you have any whatever, comment, let me know what you think of the rankings where I got things wrong down in the description. There are some obvious ones that you could say I got wrong, but I would like to hear the arguments for maybe some of the closer cases if you have any of those in mind where you think I should flip a guy one or two spots in one way or the other. Other than that, please like, comment, subscribe. You know what to do. Let's get into this, and I'm just going to go in the order that I have these guys down here, placing them in what I already have as my pre-done rankings. So we're going to start off with Derek Carr. Think of these as tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also, real quick, these numbers over here, if you've been following my channel for long enough or since last season, you may be aware that I did some deep dive analysis videos and also have that up on the website, www.theffforge.com, link down in the description, by the way, to the website. Last season, and I did some of that work this season as well, and part of that was coming to, at the end of the year, what do the tiers look like as far as the position and where, what number of players might separate themselves from the next tier? And that's what these numbers are. So on average, since I've been starting to do this work over the last 3 seasons, there are about 3 quarterbacks that are going to be separating themselves from the next tier, the rest of the quarterbacks, throughout the entirety of the position. So once again, we're going to start off with Derek Carr, who I have, I believe, down in this 5th tier of quarterbacks. Not overly excited about the prospects for Derek Carr, but in a 2-quarterback league, he's definitely not going to be at the very, very back end here. Just to give you an idea, he is currently ranked as my quarterback 28. It feels kind of low, but there's a lot of guys who, we don't want mediocrity, especially at the quarterback position. We want some of the guys who are going to have a chance at competing against these top 3 wide receivers any given week. Then we have Brock Purdy coming up next. He's going to be at the top of this tier here. I randomized these players, and so they're going to be coming onto this board in random order for entertainment purposes, at least on that front. As far as Brock Purdy goes, this is a very flexible ranking spot. As the season comes closer, as we get more information on this quarterback spot for San Francisco and what that may look like as the season unfolds, then we'll be able to key in a little bit better on what we think of these quarterbacks. But if Brock Purdy is the starter at any point from the week 3 forward, he would definitely be a steal at this, at quarterback 17, considering how he performed last season, where he was a QB number 1 for the period of time that he was on the field. According to my EV equalized value rankings, which is the heart of what ends up developing these tiers, he was the quarterback 10 last season in those, 5 games from the regular season that he played. I do not count week 18 since fantasy is not played that week in most leagues. Then we have our first A-tier guy, tier 2, starting off with Lamar Jackson. He will be at the top of that tier. He has all the rushing upside. This offense is going to be revamped probably for the better. Fantasy-wise, that is actually part of the reason. However, I did lower him. I am kind of expecting them to maybe move away a little bit from the designed quarterback runs, 1, 2, 3 less a game, something like that on average, like 2 less a game. So that might just take a little bit of the floor away from Lamar. And as we know, rushing yards are more valuable than passing yards in fantasy football for quarterbacks. And then we have Dak Prescott coming up next. He's going to be at the top of this tier. Just kind of missing out on this tier I actually just readjusted my rankings a little bit prior to filming this. There were guys ahead of him originally in this tier that I ended up moving up into this tier to make this a little bit fatter, because I do want to replicate to the best of my ability the end of season, tier groupings that we have as far as the numbers go, to, the most confidence level that I have. If I can get 11, 12 guys in this tier, then I'm going to do that. I push for that, but it's just a guideline at the same time. Now, up next, we have Tua Tagovailoa, who is going to be in this tier somewhere. We will wait to see how that goes. I'm not going to explain why he's lower than Lamar Jackson. I think that's going to be pretty obvious. And then we're going to get Russell Wilson in here in my third tier. I'm pretty high up on Russell Wilson. I don't know that I'm way higher than the ADP or anything like that. Russell Wilson's ADP is 18. I have him ranked 16th right now. But I have a certain level of confidence in the fact that there will be a rebound year for Russell Wilson. Now, might lose, he's older. That rushing ability is probably pretty much gone, and that's what really gave him that nicer floor, what pushed him up fantasy-wise into this kind of tier in the past. So although he may have one of his best passing seasons, I shouldn't say he may, but even if he did have his best passing season ever, he's still going to probably be amongst the guys in this tier, not really borderline quarterback 1, back-end quarterback, or high-end quarterback 2 kind of guy, given that they brought in Sean Payton, which I think is going to be absolutely huge. Then we have Matt Stafford, who is going to end up in this fourth tier. This tier is going to be kind of our consistent guys, maybe not the highest ceiling, but fairly reliable on a week in and week out basis, as well as that's mixed into high upside, kind of mystery box kind of guys who could surprise and be, quarterback 1s at the end of the season, lower end QB 1s probably. We'll see how the news goes along on him in this offseason to move him up, but at the end of the day, I am okay being wrong on Matt Stafford, just with all of, I don't think they really improved their offense a whole lot, and I think even if he comes in healthy, he's still so close to being unhealthy and banged up that's almost a sure thing that will happen throughout the season. And does it happen early on, late? Either way, it could hurt your team if you are relying on him. So I just don't want to take him in a position where he is the guy I'm expecting to be my QB1, which is really going to be these top 3 tiers all the way through. Up to 18 quarterbacks most seasons is usually how many I have in that preseason ranking of I would be okay with these guys as starters. Once you get to the back end, they're going to be guys who you're less, you want 2 quarterbacks, maybe you take a shot at somebody else. So next we have Mac Jones is going to be somewhere in this 5th tier. I don't think I need to explain that a whole lot. The same here with is this Baker Mayfield's going to be, I believe, right at the back end of this tier. I almost feel like I'm too low on Baker, but there's so many questions and what really is the ceiling. I don't know. I guess it's possible that could be a decent offense if he's a decent quarterback, though. So maybe I could be swayed on that as I hear off-season arguments. Then we have Daniel Jones, a guy who last season I was higher on than, I believe, than most people, than the ADP. That worked out pretty well. He ended up as the quarterback 11 via average fantasy points per week, quarterback 13 via an equalized value system, and second year in this offense. An offense that I thought was going to be good for him. It sure looked like it was good for him last season, and he has the rushing upside. I would like to see that relied upon a little bit more for fantasy purposes. It seemed like some games the rushing was there, and some games he didn't really take off at all. Very good chance that he ends up as a quarterback 1 when all is said and done this year. And that's going to bring us to Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a lot of news swirling right now, but frankly, I am not going to let that impact where I have him ranked, because I'm not too afraid of it currently. Basically, if you're not aware, Jimmy Garoppolo had ankle surgery off season. Contract got changed with the team. There's a lot of rumors swirling. Will the team get rid of him or not? I think the team was just protecting themselves. And I think if everything goes to plan, Jimmy Garoppolo's the starter for them, even if maybe it's week 2 or 3. even then, I'm not too excited about the prospects of Jimmy G. Quarterback, 2 QB league, I guess, is where I'm starting to be okay with him. And for now, they're up a creek without a paddle if they don't have Jimmy Garoppolo as their starting QB. So every player is a higher risk player to me right now, but I'm not really changing how I have them ranked for the Las Vegas offense. Then we have Sam Howell, a guy who I might be high on. I don't know about that. Emotionally, at least, I'm high on him a little bit. And we're going to put him, that sounded weird, we're going to put him ahead of Mac Jones, behind Derek Carr. This is a little bit of Sam Howell could be something. And the mystery there, to me, just makes him a little bit more valuable about what you could potentially get. And I think this is an offense that's going to want to pass. I know it's an offense that's going to want to pass much more than the team did last season with Eric Bieniemy at offensive coordinator. So the potential is there for him to be a viable fantasy QB2, let's say. And that's really going to be the truth up until maybe Mac Jones, really in this tier. I could almost split this tier into two. It used to be, but it is not anymore. Now let's get on to Desmond Ridder. And here, I think that this will be a good offense and all of that, and I think Desmond Ridder should look fine in this offense specifically, but I don't think it's going to be a fantasy-friendly offense for a quarterback. They're going to be wanting to run the ball a lot more, kind of the opposite of this situation, even though I like him as a quarterback a little bit more than Sam Howell, fantasy-wise, just don't think it's there. This is an easy one, right? Jalen Hurts. He is my QB number one with the upside, that offense, the rushing floor. I made a little bit of a mistake here, just fix that. Danny Dimes is actually ahead of Tua in my rankings. And then we are going to bring Trevor Lawrence up here ahead of both of them, behind Lamar Jackson. I'm pretty excited. Trevor Lawrence just needs to make just the smallest of improvements. It basically comes down to a consistency thing with his throwing. I think he does this thing where he gets, I don't know if it's a little overexcited or not, a lot of times when he's out of the pocket, sees a guy open, he throws it, and he just throws it with all of his might. If he could just get a little bit of touch on a lot of his throws, I think he suddenly becomes in the conversation for one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And so I think there's a good chance that he will make that last step this season. And it would be really, I think that works out for fantasy pretty darn well as well. Passing first offense and all that. Then we're going to get Aaron Rodgers in here, and I have him one spot ahead of Russell Wilson on this tier. This is where I am because of a couple of guys that I'll end up having in this tier below. I don't know how much more confident I am in him than them, but then I don't know. There could be a little bit of shaking up at the end of this tier with a couple of guys in this tier, but we'll talk about that when all is said and done. I hope I'm not making a mistake here. This should be Bryce Young, if it's not my bad. But yeah, Bryce Young here is going to make it into my C tier, up ahead of a couple of guys currently, Garoppolo and Matt Stafford. There is a rushing upside to him. Do you think that this will be a middling offense? I think that there are enough weapons and veteran talent around him and a good enough defense that not too much should be asked of him for this offense to be okay, as long as, Bryce Young is okay. There are some questions about his height, but they brought in a good coaching staff around him as well to help mitigate those concerns, develop game plan to help him use his talents and not be held back too much by something like his height. He does have a rushing upside, but I don't think that they want to rely on that. I think they want to develop him as a passer first and use that rushing as a wrinkle in this offense. So I'm really not expecting some sort of Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson kind of rushing, maybe closer to what we see from Kyler Murray, where they kind of use it a little bit too sparingly just to try and so he doesn't get injured. And I don't know, that's going to be another concern with the size for Bryce Young. Potentially it would be that Kyler Murray, does he get injured a lot? There is potential for him to break into being a high-end quarterback to maybe throughout the second half of the season or something like that. So I see some optimism for him. Let's move on to Ryan Tannehill, who I'm not so optimistic about, not too optimistic about that offense. They usually overperform, so we'll give him a little bit of a bump here. But he also could be replaced by Will Levis, who we can just go right now. I'm going to put Will Levis down here because just like Ryan Tannehill, I'm still not too excited about that offense. Don't think they have a whole lot of weapons, especially in that passing attack. Who knows what will happen between these two? Just not expecting a whole lot of fantasy value to come out of that quarterback position. Let's move on to Jared Goff, who I have ahead of Aaron Rodgers, one spot ahead of Aaron Rodgers in my rankings. They're almost tied to me. Very similarly confident in what kind of numbers we should expect to see from Goff. Biggest issue with Goff is he just has bad days in the office. Almost every year, 2-3 games, when he's had good teams even, he just absolutely lays an egg. And so that can hurt a lot. And if I can avoid it, I don't want to come across that throughout the season. Now we have, I think, Trey Lance, right? And he's going to be at the top of my D tier because I'm not convinced that there's no chance that he's the starting quarterback for San Francisco this year. I think there's a chance. Originally, I had him, I projected him as the starting quarterback. But in the event that Brock Purdy's not the starter, Trey Lance is healthy enough, comes back, he could take over this job and never relinquish it. And if he does take it over for the time period that he does take it over, he's proven that he could easily get you top quarterback, weekly. He can get you up to quarterback 3 type of numbers. He has all of the rushing upside of anybody up that will end up being up here. The ceiling is quite high. The floor isn't too bad with him if he's a starter. The passing is a big concern, and that's where it would really knock back some of the skill playmakers on this team, most notably Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. Now let's move on to Justin Herbert, who I'm going to be a little bit low on here compared to most. I have him ahead of these two, behind some guys. Wasn't a great fantasy season last year. He hasn't shown to really like to push the ball deep a whole lot, but then you can make arguments as to why that hasn't been the case. It could be the offense. I also think that having a guy like Austin Eckler is automatically just going to lower your average depth of target or average passing depth no matter what, because he is a weapon that you're going to want to get the ball to. And it's not going to be deep targets usually to an Austin Eckler. So here's the thing with Justin Herbert. Basically, I'm probably not going to end up getting him this year. He was 18th in average fantasy points per week, 18th via my equalized values system last season. Do expect him to do better than last season, but I just have enough questions that he's going to probably end up being too low in my rankings compared to others. I'm willing to draft guys ahead of him is basically what it comes down to, and miss out on him if he were to do better than those guys. And I just don't think that he's going to be so much better than the guys that I have ahead of him that I'm willing to take a guy who performed worse than most of them, if not all of them, last season anyways on a weekly basis. But this is a new season, and so I don't think he'll be as bad as he was last year. Next up, we have Justin Fields, going to be one of these guys that I'm going to have up here. And I have him one spot behind Lamar Jackson, which is going to end up making him my quarterback number 5 right now. And it's just that he could end up being the QB1 at the end of the year if he has a good season and he has some extra weapons. Now, I am more optimistic about him as a fantasy quarterback than I am about him as a passing quarterback. But he does have those weapons and a better offensive line to help him in the passing game. And so if that portion of his game develops even moderately, he could just be like Jalen Hurts of 2 years ago, let's say, which is, I don't know, quarterback 4 or something like that at the end of the year, 3, 4. And if he gets quite a bit better, it could be even better than that, maybe an injury or two with somebody else. You know how it works. But at the end of the day, the ceiling's the limit for Justin Fields, and I'm willing to take a shot on that because he does have such a high floor from that rushing attack of his. Now, up next, we're going to go to Kenny Pickett. Do expect this offense, expect him to develop better. I liked what I saw from him. I'm optimistic about his future. I'm not optimistic about him becoming a Joe Burrow, Josh Allen quality quarterback, though. And so that's why you're going to see him just one spot behind Trey Lance, which basically means at the top of this tier. And then we have Geno Smith, somebody who I'm not so confident on. Have him one spot behind Dak, one spot ahead of Jared Goff. That is going to complete this tier. Geno Smith did actually, I have him as a sleeper. Yes, he is a sleeper in my rankings right now, and I chose my sleepers, my void targets based on my projections compared to ADP if there were a certain amount of spots different in either direction. And so he did earn a sleeper tag. I moved him back a little bit compared to my projections, but do understand he projected very highly, and that's based on, previous year's numbers. But unlike the computer, I know more to the story, and there are question marks for Geno, and that's kind of what this tier is guys who could be quarterback ones, but I've got some questions about the viability of that actually being the case. For instance, Dak Prescott, I'm worried about that offense being too vanilla as the season goes along, getting too predictable, even though I do like it. Now let's go on to Kirk Cousins, somebody who I have considerably lower than the average ADP. And for now, he is going to go one spot behind Brock Purdy. And so Kirk Cousins, EV, equalized value on him was, I think, 16 for me. He was 13th average fantasy points per week, but he's very inconsistent. That's why his EV was lower. And the thing about, you think of Kirk is not a high ceiling, but a high floor kind of guy. And even with the inconsistency last year, that's still kind of my general thoughts on Kirk Cousins. I don't know. I'm backing away from those thoughts a little bit. I might. This is where I was talking about Aaron Rodgers. Do I really feel that much more confident about Aaron Rodgers than Kirk Cousins? I don't know. We got a better wide receiver for Kirk Cousins. They went and they got a second wide receiver. The only thing is I'm not like a big believer in Jordan Addison. I wasn't coming into the draft. But the potential is there that the Vikings were correct on where they took him in the draft, which would mean that he's a pretty darn good wide receiver, which I think would make a much more consistent offense here. So I'm making arguments for Kirk Cousins to be higher than I have him ranked, but ultimately I just find him to be a little bit too middle of the road. I want guys who can push these what's going to be a top 3 guys that I have in my S tier on a weekly basis, and I'm never going to feel comfortable thinking that, Kirk Cousins could outscore one of these really top 6 quarterbacks that I'm going to have, top 6, 7 quarterbacks. I wouldn't feel comfortable thinking that he could compete with them on a week in and week out basis. And I want guys who at least have a chance of feeling comfortable with that. So right behind him is Kyler Murray, another spot where it's just we'll see where this offseason takes us. If we're moving into the season and it looks like he's going to be starting within the first 3 weeks, much like Brock Purdy, I'm feeling like I got a steal back here in the draft. So this is something that will change depending on the news throughout the offseason, where he ends up being ranked. Then Josh Allen, obviously top 3 type of quarterback here, putting him in the S tier. I don't think I need to explain that. Anthony Richardson, we are going to get right here behind Brock Purdy, ahead of the Kirk Cousins, who we just spoke about. To me, I don't think Anthony Richardson will be the starting quarterback, at least at the start of the season, for the Indianapolis Colts. But there are reasons that they might do that. And the reason that there might not would just be issues with consistency of his throwing accuracy. If that's not there in the offseason, I think that he will get beat out by Gardner Minshew. I had to look at his face in order to get the name in my head. By Gardner Minshew. So I think there's a decent chance Gardner Minshew could be the starting quarterback of this team, even for the entirety of the season is possible. But if and or when Anthony Richardson gets the go as the starting quarterback, he immediately could compete with the top 7 or so quarterbacks that I just was speaking about wanting to be able to compete with. And so that's why I have him higher than Kirk Cousins, because I do feel like, okay, now we got a shot here with Anthony Richardson. He could get 120 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, just with his groundwork and rushing touchdowns. That's that. Right there is 12, like 20 points right there without passing included. That's possible. So that's how I feel about that. Sam Darnold could definitely be the starting quarterback to start the season. Don't think has a chance of being the starting quarterback of the Niners throughout the season, so not really going out there to pick him up. There should be enough quarterbacks in the draft For single quarterback leagues, not to worry about that. 2 quarterback leagues is where you start to think about some of these guys that I have in my F tier, tier 7, 6. Now, Deshaun Watson's the next guy up, and he is up in my A tier, second tier of quarterbacks, right behind Trevor Lawrence. I actually had him ahead of Trevor Lawrence until just prior to this video when I shuffled some things around. Still have him above Justin Herbert. I think it's possible we could see the Deshaun Watson of old this season, which would be like a top 4 or 5 type quarterback. There are questions about it, which is why I have, some of these guys ahead of him, but he projected out quite well. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if he hangs on to this spot, but I definitely think he belongs in this tier. I'm willing to take a shot on the fantasy player, Deshaun Watson, this season over any of these guys for sure. And we have Joe Burrow, who's going to be 1 spot behind Justin Fields, 1 spot ahead of Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't really bring you that rushing upside, which just kind of caps that floor, even that ceiling to some extent. But this is one of the most potent offenses in the league. Definitely more potent and proven than Trevor Lawrence, so obviously that's why you put him ahead of Trevor. But without that rushing upside, that puts him down just a little bit. And then Patrick Mahomes is, the one guy who, although he may not rush a whole lot, he does rush a little bit more than we've seen from Burrow ever since his injury, at least. But he's just, the best darn quarterback in the league and can put up so many darn touchdowns and a lot of games throughout the season that he breaks the rushing mold and gets himself into this S tier as my quarterback number 2. Not necessarily. I have some concerns about him maybe being quarterback number 3, and some of these guys maybe jumping him if he has even a slightly mediocre season for him, but not too concerned. Then Jordan Love is going to be 1 spot behind Brock Purdy, 1 spot ahead of Anthony Richardson, because we know that he is the starter. And this is going to go back to that mystery bag a little bit that we get with the Sam Howell, where he's a little bit higher in my rankings than not just because of this unknown potential. And he's also had the opportunity to sit on the bench and whatnot. So I'm cautiously optimistic about Jordan Love. I think he'll be an all-right quarterback. I don't think he brings a whole lot of rushing upside, though, so that's not great. But he is a guy I moved down because of that out of this tier. But would it be surprising to me if he is a top 15 quarterback at the end of the season? No. Don't think he'll be a whole lot better than that, though. And that's part of the reason why I ended up pushing him down into this tier as well. Then we have C.J. Stroud, who is going to go just 1 spot behind Kenny Pickett because he is the rookie, 1 spot ahead of Derek Carr because of the unknown potential. He could definitely be better than a middling quarterback year 1. It's possible. Not a great offense there to start off with as a rookie, though. But I think there's enough of an offense around him to work with if he is a good quarterback. So 2 quarterback leagues, I'm willing to take a shot at him there. And that is pretty much it. There are a few guys who I don't have faces for down here that I would have put in here, and those are going to be, starting off with highest ranked, Gardner Minshew, because I do think that he might be a starter. I have him 1 spot ahead of Sam Howell here, 1 spot behind Derek Carr, and then Colt McCoy would go in, I have 1 spot ahead of Baker Mayfield, so right towards the end of this tier, because he very well could be the starter, at least for several weeks in the early portion of the season for Arizona. I'm going to put him behind Baker Mayfield, actually. I'll do that right after I click out of this video, because that ranking was before DeAndre Hopkins got released. So now I'm a little bit optimistic about the upside there. And then in this extra tier, Jacoby Brissett and Bailey Zappi, I would have in that order after these 2. Maybe even ahead of Darnold or something for Jacoby Brissett. It could end up being the starter for Washington. Bailey Zappi, would I be shocked if he were to win the job over Mac Jones? No, I would be surprised, but I would not be shocked. So I think that there's, at this point in the offseason, some small amount of hope for a Bailey Zappi. And if we're going to go down that road, we could also add Kyle Trask and Taylor Heineke into this tier of guys who could become starters, but we're not expecting them to be the starters. There we go. That is my quarterback rankings. I will come out with running back, wide receiver, and tight end videos similar to this. Each of them might have different flavors, and I will be doing some best ball drafts and regular drafts ASAP. I'm trying to figure out how to do that. So thank you very much. Like, comment, subscribe if you made it this far for sure. Peace out. Post recording this video, Steve here to make an update already to my rankings. I was under the belief, had maybe misunderstood reports on Sam Darnold starting the season to mean that Trey Lance may not be healthy enough to start the season. He's very involved in the OTAs, so I don't see that being the case. And it was just a broken ankle pretty early on in the season. I broke my ankle. I know the recovery time on that. I had a long recovery time on that. So I think he'll be there to start the season as a starting quarterback, unless we hear differently on Brock Purdy as far as his starting of the season. He will be the starter. And so if that's the case, he could hold on to the spot even once Brock Purdy is healthy enough to come back. I think he'll get that opportunity. Depends how good he does. He makes this offense threatening. I talked about it last year. I think he makes it into a Super Bowl contending type of offense compared to, I don't know. Brock Purdy did pretty darn good in the system, but he just adds this element that really, really could thrive in this offense and make it incredibly unpredictable and dangerous. The question is his throwing abilities. That's supposed to be improved. We'll see about that. But his running, he proved it in the short sample size that we have had with him, that he can be a top 10, 11, 12 type quarterback, especially with a high floor in addition to that. And any given week, he could be a type of guy who could compete with these top 7 quarterbacks, is kind of where I think are the most comfortable quarterbacks that I would consider to have as my starting quarterback if I were to choose to draft one of them. So Trey Lance, I'm moving up, as you saw that, into this tier, which is kind of that tier of like Anthony Richardson. I think I mentioned that in this video. Like any given week, I would think that they have a chance of outscoring these guys or staying within 4 fantasy points or so of them, and that's very valuable. Honestly, I could see, so currently his ADP is 26th, or at least it was somewhat recently. I think that's going to be far too low. I think this puts him at about quarterback 17, move that up, or 16, 17 there, 13, 14 right here, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 13. Put him ahead of Geno Smith. Right now, I'm going to put him right here. I could very easily convince myself to put him in at quarterback 13 and not feel too uncomfortable with it, outside of the high risk of I would need another quarterback because he may not be the starter for the season, but I think that there's a decent shot that he would be. So, yeah, that's the update for Trey Lance. Thank you. This is now the end of the video.